Assalamu alaikum, my dear students. This is Shaila Akhtar, Assistant Professor English. This class is prepared for the students of MA final year. The topic of our today's class is Hamlet from the course William Shakespeare. William Shakespeare, a very well-known figure to us. Let's start with some basic information about William Shakespeare. He was born on Stratford-on-Avon, England on April 23rd, 1564 and was baptized on 26th April 1564 and he died on April 23, 1616. William Shakespeare was an English playwright, poet and actor, widely regarded as the greatest writer in the English language and the world's greatest dramatist. He is often called England's national poet and the Bard of Avon, or simply the Bard. His extant works, including collaborations, consists of some 39 plays, 154 sonnets, 2 long narrative poems, and a few other verses, some of uncertain authorship. His plays have been translated into every major living language and are performed more often than those of any other playwright. They also continued to be studied and interpreted. William Shakespeare was born and raised in Stratford-upon-Avon, Warwickshire. At the age of 18, he married Anne Hathaway, with whom he had 3 children, Susanna and twins Hamlet and Judith. Sometime between 1585 and 1592, he began a successful career in London as an actor, writer and part owner of a playing company called the Lord Chamberlain's Men, later known as the King's Men. At age 49, around 1613, he appears to have retired to Stratford, where he died 3 years later. Few records of Shakespeare's private life survive. This has stimulated considerable speculation about such matters as his physical appearance, his personal life, his religious beliefs, and whether the works attributed to him were written by others or not. Shakespeare produced most of his known works between 1589 and 1613. His early plays were primarily comedies and histories and are regarded as some of the best work produced in these genres. He then wrote mainly tragedies until 1608, among them Hamlet, Romeo and Juliet, Othello, King Lear, and Macbeth are considerable, and they all considered to be among the finest works in the English language. In the last phase of his life, he wrote tragicomedies, and these are also known as romances, and he collaborated with other playwrights. Many of Shakespeare's plays were published in editions of varying quality and accuracy in his lifetime. In 1623, 2 fellow actors and friends of William Shakespeare, John Hemynges and Henry Condell published a more definitive text known as the First Folio, a posthumous collected edition of Shakespeare's dramatic works that included all but two of his plays. The volume was prefaced with a poem by Ben Jonson, in which Jonson hailed Shakespeare in a famous quote as "not of an age but for all time." And the last 5 years of his life was spent at Stratford. So, my dear students, a writer reveals himself in his writings. In the same way, William Shakespeare reveals himself and the development of his mind in his plays. It is out of place to consider autobiographical details when we are dealing in his dramas with the fortunes, thoughts, and expressions of other personages, but by the general character and tendency of the dramas, we mark out that there is a definite development of Shakespeare's mind. Shakespeare's career is divided into four parts, and the first part is known as the period of apprenticeship, and the first period is also called in the workshop, when Shakespeare was learning the trade as a dramatic craftsman. This period is marked by the presence of vivacity, cleverness, delight in beauty, and a quick enjoyment of existence. But we do not find Shakespeare showing the fullness of knowledge of life or the complete mastery of the resources of blank verse that he afterwards attained. So, to this period, dramas belonged to this period are Titus Andronicus, the first part of Henry VI, the second and third parts of Henry VI, Richard III, Love's Labour's Lost, the Comedy of Errors, Two Gentlemen of Verona, A Midsummer Night's Dream. Possibly the tragedy of Romeo and Juliet also belongs to this period. Now, the second period, or the period in the world. This period shows in general a great advance in power of characterization and in the command of poetic resources. This period is called in the world. In this period, Shakespeare gets some experience of human life, and that is why it is called as the period of in the world. The early plays are light and fanciful rather than real and massive, but in this period, Shakespeare's imagination began to lay hold of real life. The writer acquired a knowledge of the world and the men and women living in it. His plays began to deal in an original and powerful way the matter of history. The dramas of this period are stronger, deeper, and more powerful in character. So the dramas that belong to this period are King John, the Merchant of Venice, the first and second part of Henry IV and Henry V, The Taming of the Shrew, The Merry Wives of Windsor, Much Ado About Nothing, As You Like It, and Twelfth Night. Okay, now period of sadness and philosophical contemplation. William Shakespeare suffered most in his mind and wrote his best plays. Private misfortunes weighed heavily upon his heart, and he gave vent to his feelings of sorrow in his plays. At this time, his son was dead. His father died probably soon after Shakespeare had written his Twelfth Night. His friend has deserted him. Whatever the cause may have been, it is quite clear that the poet bade farewell to the tales of mirth of love and ceased to care for the stir and movement of history, for the pomp of wars. He was now feeling depths of sorrow in his heart, and he tried to ventilate those feelings in his dramas. He was now going to study the great problem of the mystery of evil. So, in this period, Shakespeare's genius left the bright surface of the world and was at work in the very heart and center of darkness of human life. The following great tragedies belong to this period, and they are Julius Caesar, Hamlet, Othello, King Lear, Macbeth, Antony and Cleopatra, Timon of Athens, All's Well That Ends Well, Measure for Measure, Troilus and Cressida, etc. All these plays deal with the dark side and the gloomy passion of human life and character, and it has been surmised that they are the outcome of a period of gloom and sorrow in the poet's life. Now, the fourth period or period of calmness and serenity. In that period, the days of gloom and suffering pass away, and William Shakespeare seems to have learned the secret of life, and he looks down upon life, its joys, its sorrows, its griefs, its disappointment, its errors with a sort of grave tenderness which is almost pity. And he has now acquired a tranquility of soul, calm and peace of mind, which is no longer disturbed by worldly waves. So the spirit of these last plays is the serenity which results from fortitude and from the recognition of the weakness of human nature, and all of them express a deep sense of need of repentance and the duty of forgiveness. So, to this period belong the beautiful romantic plays such as Pericles, Cymbeline, The Tempest, The Winter's Tale, etc. So, my dear students, William Shakespeare's concept of tragedy may be illustrated from three main points of views. Number one, tragic hero. Number 2, tragic action or tragic plot. And number 3, tragic appeal or catharsis. So, before starting to getting introduced to Hamlet, the tragic hero, let's get some basic ideas about William Shakespeare's tragic hero. So, tragic hero is the man of high estate, and a tragedy is a tale of woe and suffering, and the suffering culminates in the death of the tragic hero. So, the total thing becomes a tragedy is a tale of woe and suffering of man in high estate culminating in his death. So the hero must be a person of high dignity and a leader in the state like Brutus or Antony, and his fate affects the welfare of a whole nation or empire, and when he falls suddenly from the height of earthly greatness to the dust, his fall produces a sense of contrast of the powerlessness of man and of the omnipotence of fortune or fate. So here lies the essential difference between the Greek and the Shakespearean tragedies. So Aristotle said, tragedy is an imitation of some action that is serious, entire, and of some magnitude, by language embellished and rendered pleasurable, but by different means in different parts, in the way not of narration but of action, effecting through pity and terror the correction and refinement of such passion. So, he further laid down that a tragedy consists of three main things stated in order of their importance, namely plot, character, and thought. The suffering of a tragic hero is unexpected but heavenly visitation. It proceeds from the tragic character mainly, and tragic flaw or tragic trait in the hero's character is responsible for the downfall. And Shakespearean tragedies are known as the tragedy of destiny or chance or circumstances. So a tragic hero in Shakespeare is the author of his own woes, who through some flaw in his own character brings the honest nest about his ears, and this presents a striking contrast to the Greek tragedy in which the hero is the scapegoat of a mocking destiny. He is not a free agent in the Shakespearean sense also. So, a tragic hero is the author of his own woes, but the role of destiny or chance or circumstances have to be in count. So, destiny is not absent from the Shakespearean tragedy. In the Greek tragedy, the noble and virtuous hero comes to grief through the jealousy of gods, and ruin does not overwhelm him because of any signs of his own part, because it arises from a blast of the envy of God. But Shakespeare seems to have been impressed by the powerful and irresistible forces which dominate the life of man, that means destiny. Now, my dear students, let's get introduced to the play Hamlet. The play Hamlet was written between 1598 and 1602. William Shakespeare is indebted to Saxo Grammaticus and Belforest for his plot of Hamlet. Saxo Grammaticus is a Danish writer, a native of Elsinore, and he wrote Historica Danica, a Latin history of Denmark, and the first edition was printed in Paris in 1514. The legend of Hamlet appears in the third and fourth books and is taken from the Icelandic saga of Danish kings. Belforest is a French writer, and he published his histories tragics translated from the Italian, and the fifth volume containing the legend of Hamlet, which was issued in 1517 and printed in Paris. So the later an English version of Belforest's Hamlet was made, the History of Hamlet, and the first edition was published in 1608. So William Shakespeare got most of his ideas for Hamlet from Saxo Grammaticus and has reproduced it in his play. Okay, my dear students, now we are going to get introduced to Hamlet, the tragic hero. Before knowing him, let's have a look on the first scene of the play. The play we are going to see is Hamlet, which opens on the battlements of a haunted castle of a freezing winter's night. In our own theatre, there is no problem. Scenery and lighting swiftly establish the required effect, but Shakespeare had no lighting, no scenery, nothing but his pen. And the miracle he worked on his original audience at the Globe was to make them forget, in a mere 40 lines of dialogue, the heat and sweat of summer, and share the numbed fingers and nervous fears of the palace guards who expect a ghost to interrupt their watch. So they talk about the ghost, and presently a cock crows, and Horatio, pointing towards the spectators in the highest gallery, says, "But look, the morn is russet mantle clad." So the scene changes before our eyes. As the sentries go off by one door, the king and his courtiers enter by another. The king sitting on the throne that has been on the stage all the time, but has not been noticed because it has not been needed. So Hamlet, dressed in black, enters last of all and leans against one of the pillars that support the roof. Now we are inside the castle, and the post where Hamlet leans has become a pillar in the royal chamber. So this is the introduction, that means the introductory scene of the play. Now we are going to get introduced to Hamlet, that means the tragic hero. That means we are going to know what type of man he is actually. So Hamlet is endowed with exceptional qualities. Before the murder of his father, Hamlet was genial, kind, courteous, and the glass of fashion and the mold of form. He was popular with the people and fond of aesthetic pursuits. Much is expected, but little is achieved by him at the cost of his own death throughout the entire play. Hamlet, the tragic hero, he was a student of the University of Wittenberg who has come down to Denmark on account of his father's death. Disguised with his mother's lasciviousness and the rivalry of the degenerate court, he is ready to leave for the school of Wittenberg. From the pompous vanity and casual lust of those around him, he seeks to find relief in the quiet life of a bookish philosopher. So, actually, he was a man of philosophical, skeptical, fatalistic, and meditative nature. He is a man of philosophy and intellectual depth, and this is best seen in all his soliloquies. His soliloquies show him to be a man of deeply reflective and meditative nature. Hamlet is always with too much given to thoughts. He is a student of philosophy, and being a philosopher, he is a keen observer of men and manners. So he looks at the world not as any layman would look at it, but as a deep thinker. So he was forever unmaking his world and rebuilding it in thought and dissolving what to others were sordid facts and discovering what to others were old truths. So there were no old truths for Hamlet. Everything was new for him, and thought obstructs action only in the main action. The more Hamlet tries to analyze the cause of his irresolution, the more he finds himself caught in a maze. His dormant energy, spurred and quickened by his oversensitive nature, turns his own enemy and tortures him for his inaction. And he was actually a man of rare wit, and he was actually a passion's slave. So Hamlet possesses a rare wit, and though his wit is at times bitter, cynical, and mordant, he wields the weapons of irony and sarcasm with deadly effects. His deep thinking mind reflects upon life, and his sparkling wit gives place to bitterness and sarcasm. And if we have to consider his relationship with other characters, Hamlet is a lover of deep emotion and unquestionable honor. So he is kind to the kind and cruel to the cruel. His cruelty too is a calculated one. We will have the evidence whenever we will advance with our further reading of the text. And he was a lover of deep emotion and honor. The emotional side of Hamlet's character is as important as his intellectual side. He is at the thought of his father's death, and his love of his father is so profound that he carries his image in his mind. His hatred for his mother's pernicious behavior drives him to generalize a sense, that is, he says, "Frailty, thy name is women." So he feels pity for the tortures endured by the ghost in purgatory, and the melancholy and madness was in the heart of Hamlet. So Hamlet's effort to restrain his emotions make him a melancholic character, and he is the only character of William Shakespeare who suffers from melancholy throughout the play and wins the sympathy of the audience. So, my dear students, this is all for today. Very soon, with another class, we will be together. Till then, stay home, stay safe. Thank you.